is Success Stories, a program of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I'm joined today by a very distinguished guest, our own Chancellor, Jack Hawkins. Dr. Hawkins is the longest serving university president in America who's still sitting, and he has done wonders for this university, and it is a real honor and privilege to have him. Dr. Hawkins, thank you for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure, Allen, to be with you, and I'd be remiss too if I didn't commend you for what you and your colleagues at the Manley Johnson Center are doing.
Well, thank you, sir. That's
So I appreciate very much what you do, and I guess as I think about that, I'm reminded of what Jack Kemp once said. He said, "There's no limit to what free men, free women, and free markets can accomplish," and I appreciate your devotion to that end.
Well, thank you very much. I want to talk about leadership because obviously you are a prominent leader in this state, but Troy University has become known as an institution for leadership. It's a place where people go to study leadership, and it's a place where people look for exemplary leaders. How did that come about, and what caused Troy University's emphasis on leadership?
I guess it goes back to a basic philosophy, and there's a story that involved the late Dr. A.G. Gaston that I think captures it well. Dr. Gaston was the son of slaves. He built many businesses, and over time he ultimately wrote a book that captured the essence of success in business. And when Dr. Gaston gave me a copy of that book almost 40 years ago, and he died at the young age of 106.
Wow.
Many years later. But when he gave me that book, he said, "You don't have to read this book." He said, "I'll tell you the secret." He said, "I could have written it on one page, but no one would ever buy a book with one page." He said, "But the key to success is you simply find the need and fill the need." And when you think about how many businesses in America go out of business every year because the business owner wanted to own a business, as opposed to looking at need, and that's what we've attempted to do at Troy University. And when I look across the landscape and I see what's happening throughout this country in terms of the absence of strong leadership, and I'm concerned. And we can't solve the ills of America at Troy University, but we can do our share. And when you can do something, you need to do something. And so we began an initiative some years ago to focus on leadership development. Leaders are trained, leaders are prepared over time. Now there may be basic qualities that go into leadership that one is born with or without, but it nevertheless, I think leaders, as the military has proven, can be trained. And so we started out with one course. In fact, it was called the Chancellor's Leadership Course in the spring of 1991. It was a 3-hour course available only to our honors students. But over time, it was catapulted into much more. And under the leadership of John Klein, some years later, we created a minor in leadership studies. And of late, we've even implemented up to a PhD in global leadership. I think it's a basic responsibility of the university to do everything we can to make a difference in those communities that embrace our graduates. And so that's sort of the foundation to it, but it's really based on need and not institutional ego that drives our whole leadership initiative that now has literally affected even the branding of the university. Lead change. And how we advocate, if you have the capacity to change the world, we want you to enroll at Troy University and study with us.
Well, I would imagine even students who possess those qualities and characteristics that would tend to make them leaders can still cultivate those skills and still can improve upon those skills and develop themselves into better leaders. So you have been the Chancellor of Troy University for 30 plus years now, probably 33, 34. What are the biggest changes you've seen at the institution over that period?
That's a broad question. Almost 3.5 decades allows you to do a lot of things, but you never do anything alone. It's taken great people, It's taken great support from our Board of Trustees. It's taken a great faculty and staff, a community that has embraced the university. And our university community extends well beyond Troy and Montgomery and even the state of Alabama. And I guess as I reflect on these years, I have to cite a few things that I'm most proud of. I think changing the culture of Troy University, it was a great culture to begin with, but early on at Troy, we concluded we wanted to graduate globally competitive students. And of course, you can't be globally competitive if you're not globally aware. And so we had 3 initiatives as part of that. One was to bring the world to Troy. We had only 40 international students in 1989 and 1990. And before the pandemic, we had 75 countries represented with 425 from China alone. And so we created in Troy, rather strategically, I think one of the more diverse universities, certainly in Alabama. The second was to continue to plant our flag in faraway places, which we've continued to do. As an illustration, I was particularly proud in 2008 when we awarded the first bachelor's degree ever awarded in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Where we have programs in 3 cities there now. And then, of course, the study abroad piece. We're very proud that every student is eligible each year for a $1,250 scholarship to help defray the cost of study abroad. And that, of course, comes from the CARTAG program. I think so globalization, internationalization has been important. Quality, you have to build your house on a rock and a solid foundation. I'm really pleased about what we've been able to achieve, including the College of Business, where we achieved AACSB accreditation, one of only 189 worldwide accredited in business and accounting. So it's those quality standards. We, of course, have continued to hang on to what I consider to be the traditional values of America: respect, civility, patriotism, those sorts of things. And of course, we can't overlook either the importance of some of those extracurricular things, like Division I athletics. We were a Division II program in 1989, and now, we play at the very highest level in all of our sports. And if you're going to do it well and do it at the highest level, and that's been our philosophy.
Well, after you graduated college, you were commissioned a lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps. You served as a platoon leader during the Vietnam War, and you earned a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and other awards. I'm curious how that experience influenced you as a leader and as a university administrator.
My goodness, as I look back over my life, I can probably identify 5 or 6 experiences that had the greatest impact, none more than the United States Marine Corps. I met my potential or future brother-in-law in 1957 when he was a Marine stationed at Camp Lejeune at the time. And when he walked into my home with the dress blue uniform, and then even over my sister's objection, invited me to go see to a drive-in movie with he and my sister, the old movie, the D.I. It was a black and white movie with Jack Webb, and I knew then, that I was at some point going to be a Marine. And so when I was graduating high school, I actually was going to join the Marine Corps, took the test. For some reason, the recruiter encouraged me to wait, talk to the officer, selection officer, and it was that intersection, I think, and intervention on the part of that Marine officer who convinced me that it would be worthwhile to consider going for a commission, and it was the commission that drove me to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college. My dad graduated 8th grade and my mother from the 10th grade, and they knew what hard work was. But they didn't know a thing about college, and so we sort of learned together as I went through that process. But I learned my most valuable lessons, life skill lessons, but particularly my best and most important leadership lessons, I think, when I served in the Marine Corps as an officer and had the opportunity to lead really some outstanding outstanding Marines.
And you grew up in Mobile, correct?
I did.
What was your childhood like in Mobile?
Oh my goodness, my dad, he was the son of the Great Depression, and he didn't have a chance to pursue an education, even a high school diploma. But he knew what hard work was, and he went into the woods and cut the trees and would load those logs, and that's what he did. And early on, he invited me to go with him, and I think it was in those woods that I began to listen to those the words of the teachers who had said, the way out of the woods is education, and that's not rocket science, but for a boy who never heard about college or a lot about education, it was those teachers really helped me to frame a different perspective, and then obviously I fell in love with learning when I went away to college, and so growing up in Mobile taught me a lot of things. I think it one, the importance of a strong work ethic. Two, my dad always taught us that it was the compact that was as important, if not more so, than the contract. Your word needs to be your bond, and if it is, then everything else works out. He also emphasized the importance of the intersection of the walk and the talk. Don't say one thing and do another. That's when you lose your credibility. And so I think that it was a great experience growing up in Mobile. I made lifelong friends like Todd Strange, the former mayor of Montgomery. We were in junior high and high school together, and then went on to college together. And others like Charlie Grady, who later became the Attorney General, and for a brief while was the elected Democrat for governor, and even Don Sigelman was a year behind. So I had opportunities there to meet some extraordinary people who accomplished in the long term some extraordinary things.
Well, your image has become associated with Troy University, so much so that people probably forget that you served as an administrator at two other institutions before you joined Troy. You actually were assistant dean at UAB, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, for 8 years. And you served as president of the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind in Talladega for 10 years. That's 18 years of administrative service before you even joined Troy University, which means you must have been a really young university administrator. How did that come about, and what was it like learning administrative work at a university at such a young age?
Well, my last duty assignment in the 60s was what I referred to, and this was after I came back from Vietnam in 1969. My last duty assignment was in Coronado, California, which is there at San Diego. And it was the best kept secret in the Marine Corps. And even though I'd never had a background in educational television, when I landed there, that's ultimately what I directed. And that gave me an opportunity to go to some really extraordinary schools, to learn programmed instruction, and even at that point to see technology as it might one day be. And that prepared me for a graduate degree, and then after I did a graduate degree, I joined the UAB, and that was a remarkable time, because it was just shortly after UAB had become an accredited institution. Prior to that time, it was the medical center of the University of Alabama. And so I began to work with, and my mentors, Dr. Joe Volker was the first president of the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and he later became the first chancellor of the University of Alabama system. His successor was also a mentor of mine, Dr. Dick Hill. And so the dean I worked for was a real entrepreneur, and so I had an opportunity then to learn how a university works. They were kind enough to let me follow them around and sit at their feet, and to learn, and then that prepared me, because my wife's background was in working with the blind and visually impaired. Her interest became my interest, and then in 1979 they asked us to go to Talladega to the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind. And I think it was there, while I thought I knew good stewardship, But when you're thrown into a place where the needs are great, the resources are limited, and I was really proud that 2 years before we arrived, George Wallace had looked at Wayne Teague, the superintendent, and asked him how long it would take to close the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind. And that was because of Public Law 94-142 that dealt with mainstreaming, and so generally across America, people felt like these kinds of institutions would no longer be needed. Not so. And so when we arrived there, we found, World War II surplus furniture was in the dorms. The buildings were not air conditioned. They were in a state of disrepair. And it was that point that we started. And I really felt good about, Governor Favre James and the subsequent administrations really helped out, had a great legislative delegation that helped. But when we left is what really made me feel good, because just in 1988, 1989, the New York Times wrote an op-ed piece and characterized the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind as a model institution in service to the disabled. To go from being almost at the point of closure to being recognized nationally as a model really made us feel good about our work there and what we were able to achieve. And then, of course, we were invited, to Troy University in the summer of 1989, and that too has been a remarkable experience. So I've been really blessed to have great opportunities to serve four great institutions when I count the United States Marine Corps. And so it's been a great journey.
And when you became Chancellor of Troy University, there were different campuses. There was a Troy University system, and the campuses were autonomous. Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, I hadn't been in Troy very long when I made you do the chicken circuit, and you've done that. You always are invited to a lot of civic clubs, and you eat a lot of chicken lunches and dinners, and it was after one of these chicken meals in Enterprise, this gentleman stood up and he said, Dr. Hawkins, he said, I have a daughter on your Dothan campus, and she wants to transfer to your Troy campus, but you tell her that you can only receive 9 of those credits she's earned. She said, how? He said, how can you justify that? And it was fairly new to me in terms of being able to frame that problem like that. And I said, sir, I can't justify that. That really prompted us over the next several years to look at how to correct that. And we did that beginning in 2000 when we reinvented Troy University. Had never been done in Alabama. We took 3 institutions and merged them into one. We took 3 curricula, 3 faculty handbooks, 3 brands. We even had presidents on the Montgomery and Dothan campuses, and we were able to successfully reintegrate all of that into one. And as I look back and as I think about the challenges inherent in higher education today and how we've had over 2,000 campuses to close across this country in the last 20 years, and a lot of it, of course, most of it is based on financial problems and the lack of resources. When I think about that, and then I realized that we saved over $20 million over the decade that followed that decision by eliminating duplication. I know we did the right thing, but the real test is always how does it affect that one student, And what we were able to achieve was we created a worldwide curriculum, and we have students who begin with us today in Vietnam or in Malaysia, and they can graduate in Montgomery or Dothan or Troy without one loss of credit. And when you think about the big picture, you always, I think, have to reduce it to our primary responsibility, and that is the individual student. How does this decision affect the student? And we try to use that as a guide, and I think in the case of that, we called it the one great university, taking 3 and making 1. But I think that was, and it was due to hundreds of people working diligently to make that happen, because if you think about it, selfish interests could take over and keep that sort of thing from happening. That's why we have had duplication and proliferation across America. It's harder to constrict and bring together as one when you've duplicated. But I think the key for our success there was when we pronounced this is not about hurting employees. This is not about reducing staff and faculty through terminations or embargoes of any sort. This is about the student. And not one person, not one employee was hurt financially as we moved through that process.
Well, that smooth integration of campuses is just one example of ways in which Troy University has been innovative, has been a first mover. Another example is offering online education long before other institutions were doing that, and gaining a reputation as Alabama's international university, and recruiting international students and building a presence overseas. All that has contributed to Troy's astounding growth over the course of your presidency. You and Mrs. Hawkins have, I believe, 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Is that correct?
No, actually now 4 grandchildren.
4 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. There's one that I missed in counting. Family has always been important to you, and the job of Chancellor is a very busy job with high demands. How did you manage to maintain such a good family life and to raise great children and now to have such wonderful grandchildren?
Well, life is about relationships. I tell that to students often, and I know at a young age you may not recognize that. In the end, life is not about things, it's about people, and it begins with family. And I think that family concept is important. You have to make time for those who love you and you love. And but the key, I think, to the happiness we've experienced is wherever we've been, we've done it together. And when I think about our girls, they were born both when we were at the Institute for Deaf and Blind. They became part of the fabric of that institution. In fact, it was not uncommon when my wife and I would have a commitment outside the home at night, for us to have babysitters from inside the institution. And I can remember many, many times the daughters, our 2 daughters would ask the question, well, Dad, can she hear or can she see? I think they were plotting how they were going to deal with their babysitter. And so I think that exposure to that special population really influenced our 2 daughters and how they approach life. And then we came to Troy, and we always saw it as a family adventure. And my wife, if there's anybody, and we often take great pride in here about Alabama's most beautiful campus, if there's any one single person responsible for that, it's been my wife. She's been insistent that we look the part. You can't make many assumptions. And our goal early on was to create something in Troy and across the campuses that we enjoy in this state that really stand out and reflect the beauty of what's going on in the classroom. It's hard when you drive through a campus, to understand the quality of your business programs, for example, or your programs in science, or whatever it may be. And so your attitude is often shaped by the appearance. And so we wanted to create a special place that would be viewed as a comfortable, safe place. And we are one of the safest campuses in this country, actually. We think it's a beautiful place, but at the very heart of that has been her commitment. And a quick story, we hadn't been in Troy very long when I had a call from one of the elderly ladies in the community, and she said, and my wife actually was working with our maintenance staff on the corner of George Wallace Drive and University Avenue in a key location in a flower bed that she was having these men to create there. And I get this call from this lady, and she says, well, Dr. Hawkins, are you aware that your wife is working with the maintenance staff on the corner of so-and-so and in the flower bed, as if there was something wrong with that. And I said, is she? And then I said, well, I'm so proud of her. We're understaffed and she's doing her part. Well, she was out there just trying to set a standard. I never heard from that lady, although later she became a very close friend. But I said, you know, we're so understaffed that all of us have to do our part. You know, you lead from the front. You don't ask others to do what you're not willing to do, and that was a great example of leadership. But it was also significant too, I think, in that it reflected what she expected of the campus and what we have become.
That is a great story and a testament to her character and integrity. In our last minute, I just want to ask you about advice for undergraduate students who are considering career paths or who are wondering what to do with their lives. What do you say to a young person who is unsure of what to major in or unsure about what career path to pursue?
You know, I had, thank you for that question, Alan. I guess one of the brightest spots, the most memorable periods in my life occurred as an undergraduate. You know, that's a remarkable experience. It's a remarkable journey. And my advice to students is to enjoy the journey. You know, life is a journey and not so much a destination. The destination is important. And early on, you need to lock into that goal. You know, it was Yogi Berra, the great philosopher, who said, if you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there. You know, so along the way, you have to get that focus. But one of the first things I'll tell our freshmen when I have an opportunity is I don't want them to have a job. I want them to have a cause that becomes their commitment, that becomes their career, because if they ever do, even one day, what they don't love doing, and all of us know too that we do well that which we love, and so that's part of the collegiate experience. You have a great opportunity to explore. You know, it's like a smorgasbord, but whatever you put on your plate, eat it, you know, and do it well. And so I think, you know, it's more an exploration, but do what you love. And if you try enough things along the way, you will find that which you love, because life and success is really about feeding your strengths and starving your weaknesses, and all of us have both. You know, so I think, but enjoy the journey, because it's a remarkable experience.
Well, Dr. Hawkins, thank you very much. This has been Success Stories, a program of the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I'm Allen Mendenhall, Associate Dean of the Sorrell College of Business and Executive Director of the Manuel H. Johnson Center. Thank you for watching.